So, good morning, folks. Beautiful sunshiny day for February 6th. This is a Assembly Agricultural Committee, and um, this morning we had the honor of having Doug Farnham with us, Chief Flood Recovery individual, works for the Agency of Administration. And so, Doug, you can drive a week here. Um, the we've got the person coming in behind you that actually does the current use program now that you used years back. I think you handled that.
Yes.
And so Jill Renrick. Yeah. And but we wanted to have you in and talk a little bit about the flood issue and dealing with the farmland and cropland and all that, just to give us an overview of how that's working out and go from there. And we'll introduce ourselves and then we'll jump right in for it.
Brian Collmore, representing the Rutland District, good to see you, Doug.
Irene Renner, Chittenden North, including Fairfax.
Brian Campion, Bennington County, good to see you. I'm Rich Westman, Wayne.
And Bobby Starr from Orleans County. So good morning and welcome to the Ag Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For the record, Doug Farnham, Chief Recovery Officer. We're never satisfied with one or two hats in the state government. We're a small but fierce organization, right? So I'm the flood recovery. I also am still overseeing the pandemic recovery efforts and the spending of the ARPA State Fiscal Recovery Fund. So for reference, inquiries into how those programs are going. If you don't know the right person to connect with, I'm a good central point of contact for anything ARPA State Fiscal, Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, Inflation Reduction Act. If it's new one-time federal funds, you can check with me and I can at least find the right person for you to talk to, even if I don't know the answer. I generally stay at a higher level, and then if it's really programmatic, would have to do a referral, but some questions I can answer myself. And yes, every once in a while you feel good about something that you accomplished in state government, and hiring Jill Remick years ago to be my assistant director, I think was a really nice benefit to the state because she's done a great job as a director of PBR after I transitioned into other roles. So it's nice to see a steady hand on the rubber there. One reason I mentioned the ARPA, I did share a current status update of the ARPA State Fiscal Recovery for the just for the committee's reference, in case you end up having any questions about where we are in progress. For ARPA, I would say most of that portfolio does not directly impact agriculture, but there are some strong indirect impacts on the agricultural industry in that spending portfolio. The biggest things I would say are related to the water investment section, because an issue I continually have relayed to me in many contexts is just workforce housing, and agricultural workforce housing is equally challenged. And in many cases, to build that housing, our older water systems, we have a community considering a water system or upgrading a water system. So over the last couple of years, I've really found that those investments in water systems are kind of foundational to growing our housing stock and maintaining our current housing stock in an environmentally friendly way. Because obviously, if we were a different state than we are, we could slap housing up and not care about what happens with the consequences. So that's not the state we live in, right? So we do have still over $100 million flowing through our water programs, and over the next 24 already, yeah. Over the next 3 years, we will be seeing a lot of those water improvements go active, and that will help facilitate the housing investments that we need to make as well. So that's the main
That
ARPA.
ARPA money is good for 3 more years. If it's all obligated.
Just under 3 years, so 12/31/2026, when we have to have it spent by. We have to have it, oh shoot, clock on me. We have to have it obligated by the end of this year, so by December 31st of this year. However, we are making really positive strides on getting those obligations made. And one thing that we included in the reports, and this is on the third slide, in the information I shared, is there's an awarded status now that we're tracking, where we've formally committed to a project. We've sent someone an award letter saying, yes, we're going to fund that project. But we haven't crossed all the T's and dotted all the I's to meet the federal definition of a full formal obligation. And that's why there was a gap on our previous reports, so like making it look like more money was undirected than it really was. $170 million in that awarded status.
So, Doug, I'm just wondering, does most of that money flow through A&R? Or is there some in the Agency of Agriculture as well? Do you know?
So, Senator, the Agency of Agriculture's ARPA investments were relatively modest. They were in the working lands programs. There was $6 million that was transferred over through the Clean Water Board process. That is directed towards agricultural best practices.
Mm-hmm.
So there's definitely been some benefit. So apologies if I get a little blasé about the numbers. I think it's roughly $11 million of ARPA out of the $1 billion portfolio. So I think it's fair to say that, you know, as a state, we didn't direct the ARPA funds toward the agriculture industry as a major sector. But yes, there was $11 million of ARPA that is primarily flowing through the Agency of Agriculture and has been helping farmers adjust to best practices and climate resilience.
And what about the Agency of Natural Resources?
So Agency of Natural Resources is where the vast majority of that water money is flowing through, and most of it having to do with, you know, there was a tiered system of, you know, a smaller program that's designed to help with villages that are just looking to get a water system or like right on that edge of needing a water system. And then other programs that are helping people upgrade or fix the combined sewer overflow, trying to help those larger municipalities generally are the ones that need to utilize that program. And then one of the interesting programs that was launched during the pandemic that we, to my knowledge, didn't have in Vermont before was the Healthy Homes Initiative. And that does a lot of wastewater system replacement for manufactured home communities, low-income home communities. We're finding a lot more opportunity in that area than we had thought. The program quickly became oversubscribed and was kind of plus up.
So whatever.
But you can, if one had a village that was having water issues, I have a village that, had leaky pipes, and they've had water issues, and they tried to, build some supplemental water capacity this past year. It didn't. And they put a moratorium on any development within the village. Is there any money left for them to apply like over the summer?
I think at this point, there's a possibility that they would, but most of the programs have pulled in their applications and have made awards at this point. So I'd say that a lot of the opportunity there has narrowed for ARPA specifically. However, the bipartisan infrastructure law really augmented and actually in just as significant or more significant a way than ARPA did, our water programs. And we should see increased opportunity for those kind of village water system repairs over the next several years. Those bipartisan infrastructure law programs are going to run for another 3 to 4 years, and then have a 4-year tail on many of them.
In this particular case, they have fixed the leaks that they had. The agency has now said to them, and they went out and they drilled over the summer, apparently, to try to give themselves more capacity. They hit nothing.
Mm.
So they're in the process of reevaluating and thinking because they need some more capacity. It's a village of about 500-600 people.
Okay.
And they're now scrambling to figure out what they can do. They thought last year by drilling, they would get extra capacity. They didn't. So they're stuck and was just wondering who they might talk to.
If they're a village of 500 or 600 people, odds are, they'd be eligible for the municipal technical assistance program.
Yeah,
And that's where they should be able to get additional assistance with planning and problem solving, project management. So I would definitely recommend. And, that program I'm still overseeing as well.
okay.
So,
Can you give me contact information?
yes,
I'll send it to them.
So does that program also take in water treatment facilities or just drinking water coming in?
so the municipal technical assistance program, Mr. Chair.
No, I mean the aquifers.
Oh. Yes, the slated programs we have running right now does address all of the different, tiers of drinking water system, wastewater system. And the bipartisan infrastructure law funding was broad as well. So it kind of raised the level of funding in all of our programs pretty significantly.
Cause I know like, Rutland has got miles of old piping.
So they wouldn't.
And I would expect
Wow.
Burlington probably isn't any better. Matter of fact, I think I heard on the way down, they're starting a big project this morning to redo some piping and upgrades. I don't know if Rutland's in on that or not.
I don't know either.
I know the federal push for, to speed up the replacement of lead pipes. And that certainly has the opportunity to benefit Vermont. I'm mostly a layperson in that one. That's about as much as I know about how it interacts with our programs. I just know they're pushing, but they've also been saying they're pushing for the last 20 years in Michigan to replace the pipes. That still hasn't happened. So
I should think
healthy dose of skepticism.
if Rutland would dig out those wooden pipes, they could probably sell them to
To Michigan,
some museum or something.
Right, I know. it's kind of crazy, isn't it? I mean, amazing.
We dug some out at home,
We did.
where they hollowed out for log.
Wow.
Yeah, 10,
Yeah,
15 years.
it's still pretty cool.
The village that I'm talking about, these are all pipes that were put in the 20s.
Well, they wouldn't have logs.
No, they didn't have logs, but I mean, it's the same issue in Rutland,
Yeah.
We have a lot of villages that did stuff 100 years ago,
I would say one kind of note I've made myself on where our money was directed with ARPA and where some of our programs just tend to exist at the state and federal level is that the largest gap for us is in those smaller communities where it's so much harder to start that system or to maintain a small system. Many of the federal programs, they're in our state programs as well. They run off a calculation of return on investment and economy of scale. That is a very difficult bar for many smaller communities to meet. So I would say that's not necessarily something that's easily within our control or the control of the General Assembly, right? It's just an unfortunate dynamic in the way our governments work right now. But everyone wants to be able to answer the question of, did you spend government money efficiently? They want to be able to say yes.
Sure.
And that leads to a disadvantage for smaller communities, quite naturally.
Well, I'd hate to be the auditor that audited some of the federal programs to see if that was spent efficiently.
Yeah.
Such as housing. That. Real $4 million. But anyways, go ahead.
So, Mr. Chair, like I said, the ARPA effort has some indirect, impact on agriculture. And the main impact it would have is that as part of the governor's recommended budget, we proposed an ARPA contingency process where because we have to have those funds obligated, before the end of the year, for programs that have run their course, which some of them have truly run their course as they were designed by the legislature. Or if it appears that they are not going to be able to reasonably expend or safely expend their funds within the 2026 timeframe, that after September 30th, we would revert those funds, we being in this case, finance and management, and reappropriate them to pre-approved use by the legislature of 90% going to FEMA match and hazard mitigation, and then 10% being retained for administrative costs and audit defense. With the spike in federal monies flowing through, with the spike in new program creation, we've seen a spike in the audits done by the state auditor, and some of those are very deep, involving more than 100 questions, and it just is difficult to pay staff to answer all those questions and all that scrutiny. So the 36 million, though, I think has a massively strong overlap with agriculture, and that's one thing I wanted to talk about today. So we have roughly, and the other document I shared focusing on more of the flood and the impact of the flood talks about the direct, damages, direct financial impacts of the flood. And altogether, we think that this will be right now, actually, the current estimated damage is just over 600 million with FEMA. And that is only state and municipal damage, not federal highway damage, which was 150 million as well. But the portions that are eligible for the FEMA public assistance program. It doesn't count individual damage. It doesn't count business or agricultural damage, which I know agriculture is estimated about a $70 million damage right now. But the reason that $600 million number is important is that FEMA gives us 15% of whatever that number ends up being for hazard mitigation. And that can cover buyouts, elevations, and floodplain restoration work, general hazard reduction work. One thing that we have that we didn't have after Irene is that there's a swift current program, FEMA calls it. We got a separate pot of money to do buyouts and elevations. After Irene, we had to use over a third of our hazard mitigation money to support buyouts. And in this, we're trying to use that swift current appropriation for as much buyout and elevation as possible, so that the hazard mitigation funding can go towards the floodplain restoration and the other risk reduction activities. Now, approached a certain way, floodplain mitigation and hazard reduction can be antagonistic to agriculture. If you approach it with the mindset of, well, we're just gonna, drop this down, we're gonna conserve the land, nothing can be done on the land, it's now purely storage for the water. And I've been involved in the discussions, I will be involved in the regional discussions around what we're taking on for hazard mitigation projects. I think we need to be creative about, living with our agricultural landscape, reducing the risk to our agricultural industry wherever possible. And in some trying to find those situations that could be more of a win-win situation where we could be reducing flood risk and still utilizing the land for agricultural purposes. I think it gets tricky, right? Because we had some crop losses.
Well, do you buy, must be they buy floodplain land from individuals so that if the water goes above a certain level, it runs out onto this land that the state has purchased, so that it doesn't flood homes or do they, is that what you're talking about?
I mean, the most,
Or buildings?
Mr. Chair, the most traditional version, right, is for the state to buy the land, for the land to be fully conserved,
Yeah,
right, for fill to be taken out so that more water can spread out in that area. And some areas upstream of Middlebury, wetlands restoration, were very successful in this flooding event, stored massive amounts of water, prevented it from doing more damage to Middlebury. Brattleboro, a lot of the projects that we've done since Tropical Storm Irene showed their value in the summer floods. And yes, that state purchase, that conservation is the most traditional model of it. I think that will still certainly happen where it's appropriate and where everyone agrees. I think the trickiest part with hazard mitigation is getting the individual owners in line and agreeing with the community about what needs to happen. I would say the administration is not interested in ignoring people's property rights. And we really want to find solutions that everyone can get on board with. The other way to approach this, and one reason when we asked for that contingency money, we asked for FEMA match and hazard mitigation, not specifically just hazard mitigation match, but the ability to use those funds for match for FEMA, but also to find creative solutions where if we need to make sure that if there's a situation where a farmer can theoretically continue using that land, producing agriculturally when there is no flooding, and they could be compensated for the water storage that they're taking on. I think that could be a win-win. It could help insulate some of the farmers against the economic harm of flooding. So I think that's the lane we need to explore is more creative agreements, more creative approaches to balancing continuing to use the land for agriculture and not just, drawing on a map that, well, these look like great floodplains. Let's, buy it from the farmers and drop the land and move on.
yeah. So I know what they call the river road at home. They, years back, we had some money set up and they bought whole farm. And tore the buildings down and I'll tell you now when we have the big rains, it's all flooded. They're gonna have to build the road up higher because the road even floods today. But that area helped save flooding down in North Troy Village and in Highwater and Duncan. Yeah.
So who's doing the assessment for that? And in my area, most of the floodplain now is it's farmland, and most of it is farmland. Most of it has the development rights going. And it's in the floodplain in the community, and they're discouraging development there. So what are you proposing to buy?
So, the way we're approaching that, Senator, is that, well, we had one fortunate element of timing recently where last year I was involved in an effort to update our LiDAR data with there was the technology around LiDAR, and I wish I could actually say what LiDAR stands for, but
I was just gonna ask you.
yeah. I know that it's a process where they fly over and they have pretty advanced technology to really read elevation levels, right? So they created a digital map of the state. We had collected that over the course of 2023, but we hadn't put it through a full suite of hydrological analysis yet. So that's what we're doing right now, and we're working with some partners, some external partners to help us with that analysis because with all the other work we're doing, it's a little bit tough to do all of that. But our hope is we're going to have that analysis done, that river corridor, watershed basin, all of the levels of elevation level that will identify areas where the water's going, where we have opportunities for mitigation, So we'll identify those parcels that, we want to focus on as far as potential projects. We're lining up, so we have to sprint right now to utilize the Swift Current program because the deadline for those buyouts and elevations applications is in April. Then in July, we have to send a list of our hazard mitigation projects to FEMA. And so we need to identify those hazard mitigation, those floodplain projects before July. And the way we're approaching that is the regional recovery officers, Pat Moulton, Central Vermont, and Todd Eaton, and Holly Hayden have been redirected from Agency of Transportation to help me in that role. They're going to be organizing regional conversations this spring that will help us generate that list of $100 million of hazard mitigation projects. So that's how we're trying to come up with the exact, what parcels, what pieces of land can we work with. I think the thing we struggle with, right, is that we can identify an opportunity for mitigation, but if the owner's not on board, it can kill the entire project. So what we'll have to do is, we'll develop this, we'll have multiple town regional sessions and discussions about the projects. Because often a project in one town doesn't benefit that town, it benefits
The next
town
one's down.
3 towns down or the next town. And so we need to get those community groups, those regional support and see if they can convince some of those landowners that it's in the best interest of that region to go along with the plan. And also come up with creative ways to try to make it worth, worth that landowner's time. In property, right?
Mr. Sheriff, I keep hearing the word FEMA. I have a county that was not designated disaster area, so I have people who are stuck, not getting a penny from FEMA.
Mhm.
Will you be going to those areas and can you spend money there buying out and mitigating? Or are we stuck with just the designated FEMA areas and will my town that got flooded as well, because it's downriver from everything else that flooded, once again be left high and dry and out money themselves out of their own pocket?
Right, so the hazard mitigation projects, that is a statewide approach. There's no limitation to spend those monies on declared counties. And yes, I mean, some of the towns in Addison, which did not get declared for individual assistance, actually had the most rain, had the most water, and had very concentrated pockets of damage, which didn't hit FEMA's calculations. I would say that for individual assistance, I've been pushing this for a while. There has been limited progress here, but the Vermont Disaster Recovery Fund is intended to be the path to help people if they have exhausted all their other options. And unfortunately, if you don't get FEMA assistance or SBA, Small Business Administration assistance, your options are exhausted very, very quickly. So we're still staying connected with that VDRF and encouraging them strongly to, have a process for those counties, those individuals that weren't eligible for FEMA assistance, so we can give them some support. And I think they do grants of up to 25,000, which is helpful, but in some cases, people lost $200,000-$300,000 or more. And
Thank you.
Thanks, Bobby. So, Doug, you mentioned in I don't know if it's a white paper or just this presentation, that in terms of the Swift Current program, 90 million, because it's a FEMA match situation, correct? So there's 50 million, I think, in state matching funds, and then 10 million in municipal match. And I realize that's spread out over the whole state, so one community is not going to be facing a $10 million match. How does a local community match it with a issuance of a bond, or how do they pay that?
generally speaking, Senator, and that $10 million, because, well, at least under the governor's recommended construct, the state would take on the burden of all of the hazard mitigation match
Okay,
so that the towns didn't have to contribute any. So that 10 million is exclusively limited to damage and repair and direct mitigation from the storm, like upsizing culverts or putting in a larger bridge with, a more modern configuration that can stand up to the weather. We do sometimes see, like in Cabot, for instance, they massively upsized some culverts. They still failed due to the debris coming down the mountain, and that same section of their downtown was still blasted, just carved out. So I think that 10 million, and I know there have been conversations around, so right now that 10 million is, the town's paying 5% of the total damages.
Okay.
So we're assuming that this disaster is gonna go to a 90%, 10% cost share between FEMA and state and local. Because their trigger is 111 million and we've got 600 million that we know exists, right? There is the potential, because that 50-50 cost share is set through the Emergency Relief Assistance Fund rule, of relieving some of the additional burden for municipalities for that match. And I think the main reason we didn't put that forward in the governor's recommended budget is that even to secure all the funding for hazard mitigation, that was a difficult balancing act. So we prioritized investing fully in the mitigation efforts to try to make sure that the next time we get this much water, there's less damage. If we hadn't had Irene and been prompted to take on so much mitigation work, this event would have been
Much worse.
significantly worse.
Well, plus they dug in the river and made that channels wider and deeper, so the water down through, is that from Bethel over across to 100,
Yeah.
you know, they cleaned that river out, so the damn water would stay in the river and not clean everything out in its path.
Was that, are you saying, after Irene they did that?
No, during Irene.
During Irene, as it was, got it.
Well, I'd say, cause, you know, you could hire a contractor to go in and do work.
Yeah.
And, that rich.
So a lot of the work that you're talking about in the floodplain for farmland, trying to get my head around this. So because most of the floodplain down through the Wild, that down through Johnson, Cambridge, Fairfax, all the way down through, most of the farmland, the development rights have been purchased by the state. It's gonna remain undeveloped farmland.
Mhm.
The conservation districts have been the most successful at dealing with my farmers and putting up riparian buffers and all of that stuff. And we've had trouble funding and getting money out there for the conservation district. Is any of that 100 million, would it be available for the conservation districts and some of the work that they do?
Senator, possibly some of the work that they're doing, I would think, yes. But it would have, FEMA's relatively rigid in that we have to frame it up as specific projects.
Yep.
And we have to present a list of those projects by the end of this calendar year.
Because
So I'm sure they'll be involved in some.
I would just say, they've been the most successful at dealing with farmers, doing riparian buffers and doing all of that sort of work. And I would think that the people that already have relationship would be the best people to work with the farmers to do stuff.
Right. Well, and I think for the example of a large agricultural parcel that is already, the development rights is already conserved, there's not gonna be any development there. Right, but depending on how the farmer is using that land, if it could be lowered so that there could be more storage there for floodplain storage, but the farmer could be compensated for the additional risk that's gonna place on them and the additional potential for crop loss, then that could be an approach in some spaces. I do think we're gonna when we look at the river corridors in our watersheds, we are gonna see areas where there is no easy answer, right? Where we're not able to mitigate the risks. And I think that'll be a big part of the discussion this spring and summer is what do we do when we run into those situations where, okay, well, we know Johnson has a really high risk of flooding, but we don't see any upriver opportunities. So how do we go about creating those opportunities without, and while respecting people's rights?
Well,
Yeah,
I would just say,
you can take Lanfear's cornfield up above Johnson.
yeah,
dig that down 20 feet.
Well,
A little more
I get
river
that.
would run in there, but you're gonna lose that
but what,
for good growing.
yeah, but what you talk about in that is a lot of the problem below Johnson is that some of, until they started putting riparian buffers and doing all that, you've had runoff that has created gravel that is ended up in the middle of the river
You can't go
downstream
get
and you
it.
can't go get it. So my thinking is if I've got conservation districts that have already had relationships with these farmers. If I could get it so I didn't get the runoff that created any more get in the river.
Yeah.
The problem is, let's keep that gravel and stuff out of the river, cause once it gets in there, they won't let us do anything.
Well, see, Doug, common sense doesn't have, there's no room for that.
Jesus.
I mean, you could go out and buy, the field that I just mentioned.
Yep.
You could dig, you can go in there and dig that excellent growing turf out of there, say 20 feet deep, and do whatever you want with it. But if you dug the river 10 feet out of the river, which you can't do because of something, you'd have good usable gravel that could be used on back roads and to build them up, but for some reason, we have laws, I guess, that you can't. The only time you can dig in a river is right after the flood, when the governor declares an emergency. You have about 30 days to, you can go in there and play in the water and have a drag line dig. But, I mean, it doesn't make any sense to waste good growing ground to catch water in and let the rivers fill up with gravel from upstream that basically lets the water run shallower. So it gets warmer. Shallow water will warm up from the sun in the summer. So then it gets to the lake. And then the algae bloom takes off in the lake because the lake temperatures come up. I mean, it just makes no sense to me why we don't keep the water where it's supposed to be in the rivers. When I was young and growing up, small, the town always used to have a guy with Marshall George was a contractor, had a big drag one. And he would take the sand and the gravel out of that's built up in the rivers. The town would take it and put it, stockpile it, let it dry out some. And then they'd use it on their town roads and on the farm. I mean, we had 5 miles of farmland. And I mean, we did ditching, my dad and my uncle, my dad and his dad would have ditching done every year on different plots of that land to keep even the runoff from the fields to stay in the ditches rather than running out into the hay fields or cornfields. And I don't know why we don't do that anymore. Somebody way too smart figured that out.
Well, I'd say, Mr. Chair, that I have had conversations with A&R about, why they don't recommend dredging, why it's only used in certain locations. And I think one of the goals of the regional discussions and the outreach this spring and summer will be to talk through and really for them to show their math and show their modeling and kind of prove their case on why it's not the right solution, right? I do think it's
I hope you're in the meeting in question.
Yes. I think that, you know, we can't afford to just apply one lens to this. It's too complex of a problem, right? So we do need to not just have an environmental lens and not just have an industrial lens. We do need to try to balance our approaches to hazard mitigation. I do think, you know, there'll be, if you have a stretch of river where, you know, for 50 miles, it's just all agricultural land around it, you know, your options there are going to be limited. So I do know that for every community that we're going to go talk to, I know that dredging and why don't we take material out of the river is going to be a topic at every single one of those conversations.
Well, especially if you get anybody there that's over 30 years old. I mean, you let the kids run the show and they don't know what dredging even is. You know, other than what they've read in books. You get some of those old guys that ran the town for, you know, for 25, 30 years ago. They'd show up. But I know, you know, I can still remember, you know, hell, it was 70 odd years ago. I told my dad when they were doing that. And I mean, we had some flooding back then, but nothing like what we've experienced here in the last 20 years.
Right.
So you could probably answer this, I think, Doug. There's gotta be an intersection with federal law and state law too, in terms of the ability to do what the chair is suggesting. Isn't it a rule that if that body of water empties into something else and empties into the ocean, that it becomes a federal situation, or am I way off base there?
You may be right, Senator, but in my discussions with FEMA and with Agency of Natural Resources, talking about, you know, what we can and can't do. ANR really has the ability to regulate the river corridors in Vermont and to do most things within those river corridors. Lake Champlain, I think you're right about the aspect because the EPA, because of Lake Champlain's position, the EPA has more control over Lake Champlain, and that's where we saw the clean water problem, where we had findings from that, et cetera. But most of our river work, we have less risk of that. With what it came down to shortly after the disaster and debris removal from the river, which I think we're still navigating. Actually, just on Friday, there was some more dumpsters and things pulled out of the river. There's still a massive amount of debris in the river that needs to be addressed. FEMA will only pay for debris removal if it's endangering an existing structure. So if you have a debris pile up that looks like it's about to take out a bridge or something like that, if it's just sitting in the river, taking up space that water should be in and looking hideous, they're not going to pay for that.
Up in Wilcox, there was stuff all along the river there, dumpsters and trees all.
Wilcox?
Yeah. Yeah, they had a good dumping ground up there.
We just came down from other.
Yeah, from up above. And that was part of the noise.
Yeah, dreadful, the Route 15 all down through here, so.
I've always been of the opinion that we did some of our best work, and Governor Shumlin was in charge at the time, right after Irene, that you got guys, all the regulations and all that stuff was just gone. And you went and saw people just in the rivers pulling stuff out and repairing roads, and it was done quickly and efficiently and expertly. The sections of Route 4, which were gone, literally, they were just gone, they were back within a few weeks to a month maybe, and they're still there and everything worked out. So I think it's a testament to that we can do a lot of stuff if you remove the restrictions when you need to. I'm not saying we need to do that every Saturday or Sunday, but it was really amazing to watch that happen.
Do you know if were the restrictions made removed because it was federal disaster, labeled as a federal disaster or something, because I know,
The governor called it.
Right.
A state disaster.
right.
Yeah.
And then because I know the Army Corps of Engineers came in,
Mhm.
they did a lot of work, I know in my area.
Yeah, there were some private contractors too that
Yeah,
were just amazing.
Yeah.
saved people's lives.
They had some equipment in
Yes,
that
they did.
river.
We weren't afraid to use it.
7 days a week.
Yeah, thanks.
But,
Anyway.
yeah, anyhow, I'm glad that you're where you are, with this, I think you're doing a good job and you'll continue.
Thank you, Mr.
And
Chair.
we're sort of running out of time.
Yeah.
But, we, we'll do some more work on this and, if we need, we'll invite you back. You find out, run across something that you think we'd be interested in. You always give me a call or whatever.
Absolutely, Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks.
Yeah. So we gotta find out how we can get hold of that 600 million.
I didn't hear that. I heard 15%.
Um, Thanks again.
Thanks.
Yep. Okay. So.
Shall
Come on up. So, good morning and welcome to the Ag Committee.
Thank you.
And we'll do a quick run around, and introduce ourselves and, get right with it.
Brian Collmore representing the Rutland District.
Irene Renner, Senator for Chittenden North, which includes Fairfax.
This is Brian Campion, the senator from Bennington. I'm Rich Westman, the senator from.
And I'm Bobby Stark from Orleans. So, again, welcome. And so Doug was saying that you kind of took his place
Yeah.
at current use when he moved on to some other job. And of course, we have thousands of acres of farmland and forest land in current use and wanted to invite you in to see how that was all going and if you were still getting requests or not and go from there.
Okay, great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
I'm Jill Remick. I'm the Director of Property Valuation and Review at the Tax Department. And I did send, I have a PowerPoint and I also have some, I know we're trying to be good with paper, but we do have our PBR annual report I brought you each copies of. It's just kind of a nice snapshot, not only for current use, but just property tax pieces in general. If you'd like one, if you don't, I won't be offended. You want to take one and pass that. And then I also brought along, this is also on our website, but this is the current use, the 2023 sort of summary of current use implications by town. Number of parcels, homestead, non-homestead, forest, agriculture, and rural farm buildings, and so on. So, if you'd like one of those as well. So Linda, can I open a Zoom or should I?
Do you want, I could do it or you can?
Oh, okay, yeah, if you wouldn't mind that.
I'll be happy to, you want me to share the screen now?
Sure, thank you.
And tell me if this is the right.
The PowerPoint,
Yes.
perfect. Thank you. All right, so, I was asked to come in to give you folks sort of a current state of current use and just start from, just really provide a little bit of the basics, lot of information obviously about current use and anything you want to get in further depth, I would strongly suggest you talk with folks from agriculture and also forest parks recreation too, if you want to get into the forest, because the vast majority of the land is in forestry.
Is that still the vast majority?
Yeah, there's a table in here that breaks it out. I mean, it's probably 60% at least are in forest. Yeah.
We can keep getting more forest.
Great, thank you, Lynn. So right, just to start from the beginning, just as a refresher, the current statutory purpose of the current use program, which has been in place since the eighties in some form or another, is to encourage and assist the maintenance of Vermont's productive agriculture and forest land. So that's sort of a key component. This is for productive agriculture and forest land use. It's also to encourage and assist in the conservation for future use and also protecting natural ecological systems. At the time, the language also addressed, and this is still what it says in statute, to prevent the accelerated conversion of the lands into more intense use, right? So rather than folks feeling like they have no choice because their property taxes are going up, but to sell off their land in pieces or parts, this can help retain those larger parcels of ag or forest land. It's also designed to be more equitable for undeveloped land. Also, of course, to encourage Vermont's scenic natural resources. Once you have this job or in any way or involved in current use, you can't help but as you drive around the state can sort of picture the parcel map and go, oh, that's encouraging, that's encouraging, I know, please. And then also, of course, to have Vermonters plan for orderly growth. So it's helpful to revisit the general purpose. So then, like I said, thanks, Linda. So I just grabbed the last couple of years just to show, currently there's about 19,600 parcels in the program. It ticks up each year, but certainly it's sort of, that's trajectory slowing as there's only so many acres that are eligible. But it does make up over 1/3 of Vermont's total acreage. And as you can see, the number of parcels has continued to go up. The number of owners has ticked up slightly. So there's about a little over 540,000 acres that are only agriculture. And then there's a little over 2 million acres of forest. And keep in mind, a lot of qualified farmers can also have some land in forest as well.
Yeah. Do you think that that the parcels have increased, but also the owners have increased? So is that because a big block of land, maybe the original dad and mom passed away, and the land had to get split up amongst the heirs? Do you see that happening?
Yeah, I would say most of the processes we're doing are more transfers or partial transfers. Absolutely. Yep. Family members, LLCs, if a farm is forming an LLC or forestry. So yeah, it's the same, a lot of the same acres, but getting sort of divvied up or shared differently. Yeah. Next.
If you had any background information about that in the breakup, the per person size, be clear it's going down. And if I go back, just 10 or 15 years ago, we saw a huge number of parcels being broke up to 27 acres. And keeping the land in current use, the 25, and they have a house lot at 20, and it's a lot of 100, 200 acre pieces. Do you have any background information for that?
I think we have that data somewhere. I don't have it today, but yeah, and I think that might have slowed down somewhat because there's only so many ways you can split up pieces and parts. And just so folks are aware, the 27 acres is because you can have a 2-acre house site and then 25 acres or more. So there are a lot of those 27.
Well, that for quite a long period of time, and some of that is arrest, it kept pushing up because they appraised land in the first acre. So it pushed the cost of the program up dramatically. And so it would be interesting to get any information.
You look right at that, Rich. In 21, which is the bottom line.
Yep,
It's 547, then you got to 20 diagonally,
yep,
and then it drops to 543.
yep,
But the number of parcels goes up.
but the number of parcels is up.
Yeah.
You can see it right in that.
Yeah.
But what that does is because we appraise land first acre is the most expensive. If you had, you have 120 acres and you break it up into 4 lots, you have 4 first acres now, so the whole thing's worth, costs more money in taxes and costs the program more money, but you're covering the same land and you probably have 4 houses.
Did you see, did you read the forest acres?
Yep,
See, that's gone up 39,000.
yep, you're making, yep,
So ag land is going down and forest land is going up.
yep, and it's smaller parcels.
And if, I did that little snapshot just to fit it on the slide, but on page 21 of that annual report, it goes back to 2012, so you can see a larger, we have data further back than that, of course, but
Yep.
if you look at that, the last 10 years or something like that. Yeah, I think we've kept every annual report since, I think, at least like 49 maybe.
Look at 2,000 parcels more.
When you were here, when we did current use, at first it was basically set up, Henry Koch set it up for forestry.
Hmm.
Then the Aggies got in.
All right, we can always come back to this if we need to. I just want to make sure I get through these and answer any questions you have. So farm buildings is interesting. It has its own piece just because an eligible farm building is actually taxed at 0% value. So in 2023, those values ranged anywhere from a few $100s to over 7 million. Some of those like super industrial, maybe a sugaring operation or something like that. But if they're eligible farm buildings that are part of the operations of the farm, then they can be enrolled in the program and can be taxed at 0 value. And there's, I think in the annual report, there's also a breakdown of farm building data if you were looking for more on that. And then, like I said, we do have it by value and number of parcels on that other sheet that I handed out.
The farm buildings, you have to be actively using that building to be able to qualify
Yeah, it has to be part of the operations of the farm.
of that first.
Yeah.
And what about if you were, you sold a cow, but you were using the barn, for drying cannabis in or hemp in?
Yep.
That would be an active
Yep,
use.
still active. If it qualifies, if there's if that cannabis operation is a qualified farm.
Yeah, legal. and all
Yeah.
that, yeah.
So the example that Elizabeth Hunt, who oversees this program for our team, gives me is, if you're using it to store your haying equipment and things like that, that's fine. If you're using it to store an antique tractor that sits there for 10 years, that's not active ag, right? So as we know in Vermont, every season is short.
Yep.
So stuff might sit in there for a while, but as long as it's part of the active use of that, of whatever's inside of it, it can be eligible. And then, next slide. The way that current use works is it adjusts the property tax bill for enrolled parcels. So when you enroll in the program, you get a contingent lien put on the enrolled portion of your parcel. The lister or assessor in your town provides a value for both the enrolled and what's called the excluded. So right, the house site with 2 acres, or if you have other land adjacent that's not eligible to be in the program. And then there are impacts both for the municipal taxation and the education fund. So the way the statute works is that every year the municipalities get what's called a hold harmless payment from the general fund that basically makes up the difference of what they were losing out on for municipal tax revenue for enrollment. That way it's not incentivizing or disincentivizing municipalities to help us administer the program. They are gonna be made whole. They're not impacted by parcels getting the program or not. And then the education tax revenue is about $50 million in this most recent year. Meaning that was the tax savings to enrolled current use parcels in 2023.
Do you have a slide in here of which towns got how much of that, or?
Yeah, I think that is one of the so that would be in this table, which we also have as an Excel on our website if you want to just sort through and sift and cut through, but yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, we can look it up right there. It's sent taxes to, yeah.
And I think to Senator Weston's point, as with everything we have seen at the tax department about the COVID impact on real estate, current use was not exempt from that either, right? There was a lot of property changing hands, a lot of property changing hands for higher value. If you do break up a parcel, the lister is required to value a house site if that's appropriate, and so that would be a higher value. So you do see that overall value of the enrollment increasing over these past few years.
Yeah.
In part on par with everything else we're seeing with property transfer tax returns and the grand list.
So is that a total payout of 69 million?
Right, so it is $69 million in total tax savings to landowners, right? So the 50 million of non-collected education tax is just simply not collected, it's not collected revenue. Whereas the municipal savings, the general fund actually pays that out to the municipalities, yeah. Right, we can go to the next if you like. Okay. Did have another slide in here on this piece. All right, and this was the piece we were just discussing, right? So, and you can see it change somewhat each year. Those asterisks just mean that we updated those numbers from prior years. But, so there's the municipal savings of enrollment, and that's what our hold harmless payment is that we send out to the towns every year. There's the education tax savings to enrolled landowners. And then there's just the total of those two pieces. So it's ticking up, it's not extreme, but obviously the value of property has been going up. And that shows up in the land use change tax as well. And again, we have this table in the annual report too.
See, we usually all go to our town meetings or city meetings. We hardly ever get any thank yous for the positive thing. That $70 million up there, you never hear a word about that. It's, you know, it helped the whole community.
Absolutely.
And actually, those dollars, if they aren't paid out, are actually spent within the community
Right.
for economic things. And, yeah, we don't hear much about it.
Let's see, and I did want to just walk through, it's complicated to administer current use because it involves landowners, involves real estate attorneys in a lot of instances. Any forest land, they often have a consulting forester to help them with their forest management plan. They do have to follow a forest management plan that is approved and monitored by Forest Parks and Recreation. So any parcel that is coming through our hand for approval or transfer, things like that, that has any forest land associated with it goes also through Forest Parks and Recreation's county foresters, and they actually review those and approve them and let us know when they're ready. We also do have a small but mighty team of folks at the tax department and PBR that are processing applications, processing transfers, checking various eligibility, looking at maps. There's a lot of components to processing these. There also is a current use advisory board that is the statutory board. I'm one of the positions that's on that board. It's also made up of folks from agriculture, Forest Parks and Recreation, appointees such as municipal official, agriculture representative, forest representative, and so on. So that it's a good mix of folks, and they actually set the use values, which I'll get to in a minute. The listers and assessors play a huge role in this as well because they have to value each of those individual pieces. They have to double check their grand list and make sure that the acreage that we have for that parcel lines up with their grand list. If there are any other deeds or liens or anything else on the property. And then once we have approved an application and an entity or a parcel is enrolled in the program, there's a contingent lien that goes into the land records. So town clerks also have to record that into the land records. The idea being that if at any point it comes out of the program, it's not eligible for enrollment anymore, then a land use change tax is set at that time. If you want the lien removed, you pay the land use change tax. That also, and I have a couple slides on that as well. That's also if it's developed or no longer eligible. We do have a lot of transfers where maybe one larger piece remaining is still eligible, but then the piece that came out is now too small to be enrolled or otherwise not eligible, or the individual who owns it is not a qualified farmer. So then those folks would pay that land exchange tax to have the lien removed. So a lot of logistics involved with.
Yeah, if a landowner applies for current use, ag one thing, do they have to have a contract with somebody to keep that active and in use, or how does that work?
Yeah, so they either have to be a qualified farmer, which there's a few different ways that can happen, or they can be leasing, have some sort of a lease with a qualified farmer. Yeah, there's also an income-based requirement, that, you know, if you are generating at least 50% of your income from the business of farming, that's one of the ways you can be a qualified farmer. So we do actually collect all those leases too and keep track of the dates. Some of them are 100-year leases and, you know, we don't have to say worry about that. Some of them are for $1, but they do need to be either used by or leased to a qualified farmer in order to be eligible for it.
How do you qualify?
What's that?
Do you qualify through leases?
Well, that gets into a whole problem that going forward that I don't think the tax department or anybody has talked about. I had leases. And the organic firm that I had with a lease, they went out of farming in June. And I'm required to have a lease on the agricultural land for at least 3 of the last 5 years. And the problem now is the nearest farm milking for me is at least 15 miles away.
50?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the question is, how do I maintain a lease with an active farm on that land? And I'm now scrambling to figure out how I can keep the land in current use. I live in a valley that when I grew up, there were over 20 farms in the valley. And as we've seen the big, the shrinking of the number of farms, it's harder to get leases to do that.
How many are there now?
In the valley I live in,
Yeah.
none.
Wow.
But you could lease that to somebody to say, house heifer something.
I can,
Would
but
that work?
but I'm in the scramble of trying to figure out what we're going to do.
Sounds to
don't
me
have-
like your options are pretty few.
My options are going down like this and I quite, it's a conundrum for people with ag land. On my forest side, because I have, to be completely honest, we have, like most farmers, more forest land than we do agricultural land. If you're a hill farm, but it's only my ag land that I'm now scrambling to figure out what to do.
But you're lucky you made it through the April listing. So you got a year to figure that out, I would say.
Well, the organic farm that was next door was the last dairy herd in the valley I live in.
So could he rent that land out to somebody to house heifers on, or?
Yes, you can do that. I think you're not alone in that challenge, right? There's just fewer folks who are doing genuine farming, or it's not time or financially effective for them to go around. I don't think I think that's a common problem for folks who are leasing. There's only so many folks doing it, and it's not financially.
And the problem for me is even if I went out and I started hating myself. It would be hard for me to say that 50% of my income came from agriculture. So I can quit my jobs and I can go to work on this, but
Then you'd stop eating. we get.
Well, yeah, but I do think that it is an issue for many people. Yeah, you know, we've gone from how many dairy farms in the state down to less than 500 in a fairly short period of time.
From the small ones, you know, the real deal here is the small ones are the ones we really care about. You know, the big guys will look out for themselves, but the small farms, people are getting older and it's sad to see those sold off because you know who's buying them. It's either a big farm, which is fine, or somebody from down country that wants to have a weekend in a summer place, you know. So,
Yeah, and a lot of folks, and I should mention, there's another way, which is to at least earn $2,000, I think it is, from the sale of some sort of product. That's another way that folks can have, plan in the program. But yeah, and the income one is tough too, because, right, a lot of families, maybe farming is their main body of work, but maybe one of them has a job with a state or something like that, and
A lot of young couples, where one works off the farm and one works, but to produce that 50% number is a high bar.
you gotta put a clause in there that as long as the one that works off the farm incorporates their income into the farm account to keep the farm going, they should still fall.
well, I guess it depends. We have a lot of various, there's the statutory language, there's the current use of administrative rules, and then there's been lots of hearing officer decisions, so I don't want to speak out of turn, but the idea being that I think that is catching a lot of farmers right now, and it's not meaning to catch them, but it's an unfortunate hurdle for some folks that are trying
So
to keep their farm operating.
We've had a lot of farmers over the years, say the wife is a school teacher.
Yeah.
And they bring the money home to keep the farm going. And, you know, so it's kind of, even though, I mean, they had to do that to keep the farm, so.
Health insurance, all that.
Well, the neighboring farm, there was the organic farm next to me. The wife works as a nurse at the medical center. And the husband, they now are shifting and they have a big sugar place, but they've got rid of the cows. So what happens to the agricultural land? And how do they maintain that? And it's hard.
Yeah.
And nothing else is going down in price, farm equipment and gas and all those kinds of stuff.
So these were all 2023 numbers.
Correct.
I would just point out that on your exempt total property taxes, the highest community for exemption is Stowe, which is over $2 million exempt. Woodstock and Concord are 2 and 3. I quite frankly don't think of them as agricultural tenants.
Well, they must have quite a lot of land signed up.
I bet you there's a lot of 27-acre pieces. And so it's in Woodstock and Concord.
Do you have it broken down that walls, size of the parcels for each town?
Yeah, that second column is number of parcels in each town. But I don't know that I have it broken out by which ones are forest versus which ones are ag on this sheet, but we certainly have that. I think we have the number of acres enrolled on this sheet broken out by forest and ag. So the number of parcels in Bakersfield is 100. The number of acres in Bakersfield, I'm just looking at the first page, 15,000 are forest acres and 2,400 are agriculture, just for example. So you could start to kind of slice and dice that a little bit, but we could certainly report out on the number of parcels.
So Bakersfield has 100. Woodstock has 190.
Say they were kind of 27 acres, so.
Cheers.
But we,
I just,
we'll raise,
I don't mean to be, but
we'll raise the.
Yeah, and again, that, that exemption, and just to be clear, that 50 million that is not charged to the current use parcels is still made up for in the ed fund, right? So when you have, you'll notice too that some of the communities that may have lower property values overall may not have as high enrollment. It's not necessarily worth putting a contingent lien on their land, for that use value if it's not gonna be substantially helpful, right? But if you have a high value property, then you're more inclined probably to try to do that.
Troy has 74 parcels.
Going.
Yeah, Troy has 74 parcels. Woodstock has 190.
Well, one of the reasons in Troy, the numbers are down. We got one farm that is like 4,000 acres.
Again,
All right, I'll fly through the rest of these quickly, so I wanna make sure I answer all your
We'll
questions.
try not to interrupt.
No, it's good, this is why I'm here, right? I'm happy to come back, and like I said, if you really wanna get in deep, I don't have great visuals, for example, that's not my forte, but Forest Parks and Recreation has some really great maps to show where the different current use enrollments are, and agriculture certainly, I'm sure they'd be happy to send something over as well, and we also can come back with any data or to testify on any current use related items. So just for context, I just had a couple free folks to know, for this past year, we reviewed about 1,700 applications. And the vast majority of those were transfers, right? Because there's only so much land to go around. People might be doing a partial transfer or an entire transfer. So, and if the parcel is currently enrolled in current use and it changes hands, so we capture that on the property transfer tax return. The new owner of that parcel has a window of time where they can apply to continue to enroll. And then they wouldn't have to pay the land use change tax or anything like that, as long as they or the property is still eligible. The idea being, if the person you're selling it to is gonna continue to maintain it in current use and continues to be eligible, they can continue to do that uninterrupted. Yeah.
So, if you had a parcel and you left your son and daughter, you split it. And the daughter lived in California that no longer wanted her half.
Mhm.
So she would owe a land transfer tax.
If she wanted the lien removed, so the contingent lien will stay on there indefinitely until someone pays that land use change tax. Yeah. Yeah. All right, we just had our current use advisory board meeting last week, so they do have administrative rules that we're in the process of trying to update. They haven't been fully updated since 1985. So they come up with the use value. So essentially, when you enroll, it's all based on the acreage, right, other than the farm building component. So when you enroll agriculture land, then your use value that you're taxed on for 2024 is going to be $483 an acre. For forest, it's gonna be $188 per acre. And then there's a third category of use value, that forest that's greater than a mile from a road, so it's a little bit lower. So Forest Parks and Recreation and the Agency of Agriculture actually come to the current use advisory board every year with this really elaborate sort of calculations that come up with. They use like stumpage value, they use mill prices, cropland rentals, things like that to come up with this value. And then they average it over 5 years, so it's not too volatile. So in the annual report, we've got those back to, I don't know, at least 10 years. You can see what the use values are. So that's a
What
substantial.
was the ag value last year?
476 maybe, it didn't go up a whole lot.
No, because milk prices, I don't think have gone up any. Pretty stagnant, so.
Yeah,
That would be about right, a few dollars. Isn't there something about tonnage of a certain crop?
I think so.
They look at.
Yep, they get a lot of data from like USDA too, to come up with that figure. And so then for the 2024 year, for those use values, those are the pieces that we'll be sending to the listers and assessors. That's what the folks are gonna be paying their property tax based on for enrolled acres. I can quickly go through these next few, right? I think this committee is probably a little better versed than your average Joe, but you know, some of the reasons for enrolling, right, is that you would see a pretty significant property tax savings on in that enrolled acreage. That's just an example to show that. But then the next slide is kind of, okay, why wouldn't you want to, right? So the continual lien, once that's on, that goes with the land. So until it's developed and the land use change tax is paid, until it's no longer eligible, maybe there was a cut contrary that Forest Parks and Recreation identified, or you want the lien removed, then that lien remains on land. There's definitely a cost to prepare the application materials, the maps, the forest management plans. I like to think for the agriculture, it's not quite as expensive, but you still do need help with like your mapping and the paperwork, things like that. I think the application fee, including the recording fee that goes to the town clerks is $90. Again, like I mentioned earlier, if your property value is low or, you know, for whatever reason, then we would necessarily give up your time to enroll in the program and then have that lien on your land. And the land use change tax, I can't recall if I actually even made it as far as this committee or not. The land use change tax is pretty difficult for, to administer and also for property owners to understand. You don't know what that penalty will be until you've made that commitment to remove the lien. So, because it's basically the way the statute works right now is the land use change tax is, requires the lister or assessor to value that acreage coming out as a standalone parcel. And then the land use change tax is 10% of that. So,
It's pretty bad, actually.
so it can be very unpredictable. You can appeal, there's an appeal process, but, so if you're considering going into the program, but you think you might want to take it out in 8 or 10 years, you don't really have a sense of what that land use change tax penalty would be.
Can you move the, you know, usually you have 2 acres extracted for a house lot. Can you move that 2 acres, do you know, to a different spot on the property?
Right, possibly. I know a couple of years ago, the statute changed so you could have more than one dwelling within a 2 acre site, for example, so folks could sort of move around where that is. But I think might depend on the situation, you know, if it's moving from one category into a rural land.
Well, what I was thinking is, you have a road to get to the woods. So once you get to the woods, you know, then you have just a woods road. You decide to take that woods road and make it longer into the woods. So, and if you wanted your 2 acres, you know, up into the woods further, you could move it from the edge of the woods to the new spot up in the woods to be more secluded or whatever reason you decide to do something.
Yeah, I think at a minimum, you need probably a new map to show where the excluded acreage is. And the lister would have to set whatever that value of that house site is. That's my guess. There's a summary on the next 2 pages of just some of the enrollment. There's a lot to it. A lot of this is mapped out in statute about what can qualify as forest enrollment. And then last year, the legislature did add to a possible is that reserve forest land. That's a newer category now in current use. So this will be the first year of us actually seeing applications that have reserved forest land. It's very like intricate qualifications and measurement of what qualifies for that I would definitely defer to FPR. It's, you know, percentages of sensitive areas, percentages and proportionate to the overall enrolled acreage and so on. So that was a change last year.
But do they, you know, these forever woods or they must have to get out of current use, right? Because if you can't manage it, how can you stay in?
Well, I think the theory is they can stay in, they still would have to have a forest management plan. It would be assessed as if it was reserved forest land. That was the change last year, is my, like I said, I definitely want FPR to come in, but that's.
I didn't vote for that,
And
it's a good vote.
then one
It
piece,
is, it's to help people that wanna buy 50 acres and grow old trees. And then we're helping to pay the tax on it and you know, when a tree gets to the end of its life, and it's like us, you know, we die. And you have to manage a forest like anything else if you want a healthy forest. That doesn't, that's not a good deal there. Oh, no. But anyway,
so the last bullet on there that's helpful for this committee is just, if an owner is a qualified farmer, then they can have unlimited non-productive forest land. Or up to 25 acres of productive forest involved. So ag land and buildings, right, there's, again, it's pretty clearly spelled out in statute, and we have a combination of the statutory language, the administrative rules from the current use advisory board, and then like Supreme Court or hearing officer decisions. But in general, it's active agriculture use. So, pasturing livestock, growing some sort of crop or hay, apple orchards, maple products, things like that, that you're producing something from that. So, not to go down the rabbit hole of horses, but if you're pasturing horses and you're raising horses to sell horses, you're breeding horses to sell horses, that's active. If I'm boarding my horse on Town Hill Road for him to, you know, that's boarding and I'm not, it's not active agriculture.
Can I ask if this is a question we face. If we sell hay, the horses to people in southern New England, is that agriculture?
If you're a Vermont farmer that's producing that hay and selling
If
it,
we're, if I take 50-acre meadow and we're not doing other things, but we're doing that in some way, is that agriculture, us selling hay to someone in southern New England?
sure, it's like growing strawberries, if as long as you generate $2,000, I think it is. You're in.
so that's the threshold for, if you make at least $2,000 from the sale of that crop, then that would qualify. I don't know if you would, I don't know what hay is on for, but.
Well, but the reason you would take it to southern New England or take it to Saratoga are those, you go from $4 or $5 a bale to 15.
Yeah.
I've been told that that's not agricultural, dealing with horse people. I'm asking
Yeah, I
the
shouldn't have
question.
mentioned horse.
But horses, I think horses were considered a different category, but I'm not sure,
Right, I think you can sell your crop to whomever, wherever you want, as long as you can demonstrate on your income tax that you've earned at least the $2,000. Let's see, how am I doing?
Yeah,
Oh,
that's
okay.
just about out of time.
Okay, so development, like I was saying, I think we sort of covered this, right? And development is triggered by a few different ways, carving out a house site. If you create a parcel less than 25 acres, right, and again, there is this sort of exception. The cut contrary, so this is if the Forest Parks and Recreation, when as part of the forest management plan, they do a spot check, they find a cut contrary. I think there's an example of this I just saw this morning in Digger about a forest land that had a cut contrary because the person they hired was not exactly the most up and up forester. If you construct any building, road, or anything like that, that's not related to the farming, logging, or forestry. So the example I always think of is, you know, we found one that was like, it was a bike dirt track. That's not part of the farming or the logging. But if you're creating a new trail to reach a new field or a new trail to reach a different stand, you're good. Also, the agriculture enrollment has to meet the agriculture's water quality. They'll let us know if there's a violation of that. And a lot of times we'll try to work with And I think, Agency of Agriculture does as well, it's sort of trying to work with folks to mitigate that, so it doesn't come to the point of actually being removed from the program. All right, sorry, I'm rushing, there's so much to this, but like I said, I'm happy to come back, this is all on our site. So the land use change tax, I think we've kind of already talked about that, right? That's that standalone, if you develop it, or if you want the lien removed, you've got to pay the land use change tax. It's set as a standalone parcel by the municipality, and it's then 10% of that valuation. And the way that we did, we collect that land use change tax from the taxpayer, and then we send back to the municipality up to $2,000 of whatever we've collected. And then there's just a table on the next slide that's just sort of giving you some sense. And land use change tax is a little different, right? It's not predictable, it's not necessarily linear, because different years, different parcels might come out, different parcels might come out that are a different value, so it's not necessarily going to look the same every year. But that sort of shows that trend over time of buildings coming out, acres coming out, or and then the number of total withdrawals. I think that's pretty much it. I did want to let folks know, especially if any of you we are working towards modernizing our processes. We still very much are using paper maps and scanning in applications. And so we have 2 huge file rooms of paper maps that go back to late 70s and 80s, some of which are kind of disintegrating. So we are going to be moving our all that, we're gonna digitize that as part of a larger effort in the tax department. Which could also cut back on some of the costs, because right now we actually require applicants to submit 3 paper copies of the maps, because one goes to the local officials for the land records, one is in our files, and one goes to Forest Parks and Recreation. So that's expensive when some of these maps are massive and expensive. That's all I have for my PowerPoint, but I'm happy to take any questions or come back another time.
Yeah, well,
Or maybe
I
you're
think-
situated.
we, we may have you back when we get some house bills over here.
Okay.
And, but really want to thank you for your time today. Appreciate all the, all the, and, so thank
Thank you, nice to see you.
So committee, we have, Jason Roberts, is it? Yeah.
This is
Morning. Grab a seat there, Jason. And,
Morning.
Morning.
Yeah, I realize time is valuable and I appreciate it.
And running right through, and Irene brought us some material, I believe, a few weeks ago in regards to your situation in Essex, and there's been discussion in both directions in regards to it, whether it should be allowed or not allowed, and we just felt that, it'd be great to hear from you, and I don't, is Jason a constituent, or you're just a close neighbor or something?
Relatively close.
Yeah,
He's in Essex Junction, I'm in Essex.
so we thought we would have you in and talk
Thank you.
about the whole issue.
Well, yeah, I was concerned because of the grossly erroneous information that legislative council, presented to you and, what kind of conceptions you guys reached because of it. So I'm here to address those, answer any questions, clear any misconceptions and, let the discussion on the table. So, the first thing he said is I have 100 ducks, and that isn't even close to the truth. I currently have 26 adults that are used for breeding and egg production purposes. Now, part of my business model is selling live birds and eggs. And I have an incubator with a capacity of 50. So that means when a clutch hatches, my numbers will vary considerably. However, that doesn't mean that the population is going to maintain those numbers. There are ducklings and juveniles that are for sale or to be eaten.
So you average roughly 26.
At the moment, I have 26. Yes.
And, yeah, we were, I don't know, whoever testified to that, if they were,
State Council, Michael Grady.
yeah, but they get their information from, you know, it could be incubator ducks, baby ducks and big ducks and,
But at no point if I had 100 or even anywhere close to it.
oh, good.
So I mean, I'm confused as to why you're even discussing not allowing small farming. I mean, this very building, there's a statue that sits at the top of it, that's Ceres, the Roman goddess of agriculture. That's because agriculture is a foundation of Vermont and it's a part of our identity and culture. I think it should be encouraged, not, farmers shouldn't be demonized and operations shouldn't be vilified.
And part of our goal was to, you know, to protect and enhance small farms, but when you get down under an acre or so, that's kind of a real small farm.
Sure.
And, you know, it's in a, especially in an area where there's residents, you know, not that far away.
Sure.
So there's two sides to that story, whether.
Well, the Essex Junction, as you know, the representative I mentioned, is small, it's 4.6 square miles. There is an agricultural district which lies directly next to a densely populated residential area. And not only that, but the city has a deal with the Whitcomb Farm to spread tons of human biomass on those fields next to a densely populated residential area. So they're saying that one area of the same city is okay for that, but not for me to spread some duck manure on my,
Are you in the agricultural?
I'm in a residential district, but like, as I said, the agricultural district that exists in Essex Junction is adjacent to a very densely populated residential area.
If you were, I would assume that you were in the agricultural district of your community, it wouldn't even be a concern.
Yeah, well, I mean, in the history of Vermont, there's only been one municipality to challenge whether farming is regulated by the state or at municipal level, and that's Essex Junction. That's why we're here today.
So are they, as a town,
Well, this all came about because of one neighbor's complaints
to the town?
to the town, to the city. There's a long, well-documented history of these people, Sharon and Steve Padnos, filing a number of different complaints for a number of different things in terms of my operation, from noise, campfires, and smell. But at no point have I been issued a single citation. I have a FOIA request I can show you right now where we've had notices called the fire department and the police, alleging that burning marijuana smoke was entering their home. So on the 5th of June, 2022, at approximately 11:30 hours, I was dispatched. This is the officer's report. I was dispatched to the 8 Taft Street location residence for burning marijuana, and the smell was going into the residence of 6 Taft Street. Upon arrival, I could not smell cannabis in the area nor see smoke. I attempted to knock on the front door twice, no answer. I continued to 6 Taft Street, spoke with the residents who stated that the mail was in the backyard and they allowed me to walk onto their lawn to get to the gate of 8 Taft Street. I was able to make contact with the resident of 8 Taft Street who appeared to be burning a small brush fire in the backyard. So in speaking with Mr. Struthers, I informed him that Essex Junction ordinance, the only thing I was in violation of was my fire was on the ground instead of on approved structure. So, you know, either these people can differentiate between normal campfire and a pile of burning marijuana, or they provided false information to the police with malice. And one thing to note is June 5th of 2022 was before I had a harvest of cannabis, adult use cannabis. So how can I burn a pile of marijuana that doesn't exist?
What about hemp? Did you grow hemp?
I grew hemp in 2020 and 2021, yes.
You could have been burning some hemp, right?
I was not. Nor did the officer notice any smell of the sort in this police report. And this is not only the first time this happened the second time in 2023. The exact same thing happened. The fire department brought the ordinance to the Padnos. They explained to them that I wasn't doing anything wrong, and I certainly wasn't burning any marijuana.
And how far is that neighbor from,
Adjacent.
or right next to
Next,
you?
yes.
That, yeah, because those, I don't know, I saw the map of the houses and stuff. You aren't too far.
Well, and I may be a small plot of half an acre, but I attest that, you know, not only do I fit but it's appropriate. I have plenty of land for both my cannabis and my ducks. And small farming should be encouraged, not vilified.
How many acres?
0.54.
0.5.
So, I mean, I know how big an acre is. And a half acre, and the house on it, and the driveway. And I don't know if you have any elder places, but you've got a shed to keep the lawnmower.
barn.
in. There's a whole lot of property left there.
It's very subjective. I find there's plenty. I could even expand substantial amount.
So you don't do many plants and
What kind of plants? Last year I had over 150 tomato plants.
tomato, I mean.
I am cannabis, I'm allowed up to 125
On that
on
property,
that property.
be kind of crowded, wouldn't it?
In my opinion. I have plenty of room for expansion. I could, and well, so in 2020 and 2021, I had 250 hemp plants. Now, hemp has a higher terpene content than adult use cannabis or THC bearing cannabis, which means it's far more smelly. Now I had double the capacity of my adult use license and no complaints were lodged, not a single one with the AAFM anywhere. So this is more of a discrimination against THC bearing cannabis, reefer madness, and a taboo against a plant that is not only regulated, but allowed by every home in Vermont to grow.
It's 3, isn't it?
Whatever it is, I don't know what the, I
I think
know what the specifications are for my
1, 2,
commercial operation, but
3 inside.
well, you can make a substantial amount of smell with 3 plants, especially if everybody has it.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get a little history or whatever. You lived here before you began to grow cannabis?
Yes, sir. My family's owned this property for 42 years.
Okay. And not to pick on neighbors or anything, but there was no conflict before this? Everybody was kind of getting along in the
Not
neighborhood?
until I started growing adult use cannabis.
Okay, so you feel strong that's what triggered the
Absolutely.
complaint?
I mean, there's been no complaints about my hemp. In fact, the neighbors were asking me for some.
And I don't know much about that industry, but it seems like kind of smells the same.
Smells more. I would argue it has a higher terpene content, and that's what the molecules that cause smell and taste.
So it wasn't the ducks they were objecting to, it was the,
Well, I mean, the original complaint was odor, and what it was actually was that I had a compost bin in between our houses, and admittedly, it was smelly, and I address that. And when I brought that up, along with a number of other ways that I've been mitigating their numerous complaints, they said that they can still smell hay. And that they don't, and they stated on public record that they don't mind farming, they just don't want to see it here. So it's a not in my backyard, quite literally situation. But what about my backyard? Am I not allowed to do what I see fit and grow my own food and, offer organic produce, fruits, vegetables, and eggs to the community?
So do you have a fence between the two properties?
My
A solid
entire
fence?
property is fenced in. Sir,
Solid fence or?
well, black chain link fence on 3 sides, and I had to, change the fencing on 1 side. But so it's not, it's just a post and wire, but that can certainly easily be remedied. I mean,
I didn't know if you had a solid fence,
not,
then the smell might go up over it, but.
well, and had any of the neighbors come to me at any point, no neighbor, no member of the municipality or otherwise has come to me ever and said, we have a problem with what you're doing. Is there anything we can do about it? Can we mitigate this? Is there anything we can do? Nothing. I just get notice from the city in the mail saying that I need to cease operations.
So they have sent you a cease and desist.
Well, yeah, they said that my ducts were out of specification with the land development code. I said that I'm an agricultural process, and section 1702 of the municipal code clearly says that all agricultural processes are exempt. And they said, well, we don't think what you're doing is agriculture. So I gave them the definition of agriculture. The city replied and said, well, you need to be a farm. Okay, so I contacted the Vermont Agency of Agriculture, Farm and Markets, and I went through the process and got, and May 5th of 2023, May 4th, I got official status as a farm because I produce and sell fruits, vegetables, and eggs on livestock.
So what are you hoping, your goal of being here today, some background on this, which is certainly helpful. Who are your senators? So I
don't know, but my representative, is Lori Halpern and Karen Dolan.
Okay.
They both introduced, legislation that I'm going to provide testimony on today to try to stop my farming operations.
So your hope in the legislature is to do what over the next couple of days?
Stop H549.
Stop H549. Okay. And do you mind reminding me what's 549?
It is the regulation of outdoor cannabis.
Got it. Okay.
So my concern is that Representative Houghton presented the bill as only commercial, but as it reads, it is all outdoor cannabis cultivation, which would affect home growing. So this is going to affect not only every cannabis business in the entire state, but every single person who wants to cultivate cannabis. And so, I mean, there's 2 very separate issues being conflated here, my ducks and my cannabis. So I'm here to provide information on both.
But if there's only 20, you pasture, I assume.
Yeah.
The 26 adult dog
Correct.
on the same property as you plant your cannabis on
Yes, sir.
in the summer.
Yes.
What happens to the 26 adult ducks once you plant your cannabis?
They continue to produce eggs and,
No, but in the same plot.
yes, sir.
So you don't have to have like a different pasture or area for the duck.
No, sir. They are pasture raised and they are free to roam within the fenced area.
It's one way of doing it.
Well, I mean, in August of 2011, I sustained a It's first fracture and my thoracic spine and miracles of modern science were able to give me a titanium vertebrae and stabilize my spinal cord injury. Part of my recovery process was growing organic produce and cannabis as medicine. So I've been growing cannabis on this land since I think 2015. That's when I got my medical marijuana card.
Never complained.
Zero. And then 250 plants, giant hemp plants in my backyard, not a single complaint. But the second that it became adult use THC bearing cannabis, it became a huge deal.
Yeah, that's strange.
And it was the same neighbors.
Correct.
Yeah. But we, we have had other complaints from other people, small farm cannabis, the odor.
Okay.
Not your, but another sources. But that's gone on, neighbors complaining about neighbors, from manure spreading to, cows roaming loose or heifers, to the odors, and it's gone on forever, but. So did you grow product on your plot before, you say, 2015?
Yes, sir.
Did you used to have crops there prior to that?
Absolutely. Massive amounts of crops. I try to grow as much as my own food as possible.
So it isn't that you changed use of that land.
I'm sorry.
Other questions for Jason?
Yeah, thank you.
I would like to just answer Brian's question, that's the Chittenden Central District. So that would be, our team Tanya and Bill
Oh, thank you.
for senators.
Okay, thank you. Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, I have zero representation or, I'm a single disabled person up against an entire municipality, both representatives in my district, and now the introduction of possibly new legislation.
Well,
Appreciate having here.
we only do 100 bills if that. So it takes a lot of work to pass bills. It takes a long time. I don't know the House, how they're progressing with that, what committee it's in. H 450 or 549 must be an ag.
It's in the Committee of Government Operations and Military Affairs.
Really?
It was introduced into environment and energy, and I don't know why it got transferred. I don't know if it's because they didn't get traction or if they, where cannabis is, government ops.
You see, that bill would have been introduced last year, I believe.
No,
It's a good question. They had a little time this year to put some things in.
January 3rd, according to the,
Yeah, so it did come in.
and it was, Amy Sheldon of Middlebury moved that her committee be relieved of it, sent over to government.
I would expect though that's gonna end up in ag.
Yeah.
I would,
If it has traction, I would hope it doesn't.
Well, it doesn't always get moved because of track. It's jurisdiction. And I don't know, I haven't read the bill, so I don't know if it's ag or if it's, building laws, but. Anything else from anybody?
I just want to reiterate that, I understand that everybody has concerns about farming in a residential area and the impacts it has on neighbors. But again, the agricultural district that is in Essex Junction is directly adjacent to a very densely populated residential area. So I'm not doing anything out of what the city's already classified as located.
Except for you're not in the ag district.
I am in the R1 district, yes.
That,
And
I
that is
mean,
being,
that's
that
a
is
big
being,
issue.
that is being challenged actually in Vermont Superior Court. I think.
Yeah, that, you know, if you were sitting in the corner of the agricultural district, I don't think there'd be a hill of beans worth of validity.
Yes, sir. But where do you draw the line? If I'm gonna move my operation somewhere else, I'm gonna face the exact same opposition. I could be hundreds of feet away from a neighbor and I could still gonna get complaints. So how far is far enough and where's the line drawn?
Well, you know, if you're in an ag district, they can put up all the red flags they want and holler as loud as they want and tough luck, but you're stuck in a residential district and you're trying to change the use of it from strictly residential to some other form of use. You know, they do have a right to stand on. I mean, I was on the zoning board back home for years and years and yeah, we had farmland, but we lived near JP, ski area. So it was hard to change that from strictly ag to ag business, you know, ag and commercial. But because that, if you own just ag land and you're on the road to JP, and somebody comes along and wants to buy a corner lot to put a motel on or a hotel on, it's zoned strictly ag, you're SOL. If you know, so that zoning means quite a bit. If you've got it zoned ag or zoned residential or zoned commercial.
The state law specifically says that municipalities may not regulate farming.
Yeah, but they regulate zoning. And that must be what they're after you on, is you're trying to farm in a residential area in.
Oh, it's the ducks. It's not my farm. It's not the production of tomatoes or cucumbers. It's the ducks.
So I was trying to think of a way you could get around it. If you.
I would love to buy some land in the agricultural district, but there's one lot for sale and the overwhelming amount of land is owned by one farm. And again, it's right next to a densely populated residential area, so I'm gonna be facing the exact same problems.
Yeah. Well, if we should happen to get that bill from the health, you know, we'll certainly notify you and invite you in again.
I appreciate that.
But I guess the only thing we can do is wish you well.
Okay. Do you have any other questions?
Well,
about-
appreciate you coming.
Thank you.
You know, coming in to.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. I appreciate it.
It's, you know, you hear it all here, so we wanted to certainly hear your, you know, your side of the issue.
Thank you. Have a good day.